Hi, my name is Yahav, and I was born and raised as an Israeli and as a Zionist. During the past few years, I've gone through a process of questioning the narrative I grew up with regarding this land we live in and the people living on it. This podcast is about voices of the disillusioned. Each episode is a one-on-one heartfelt conversation with an activist who supports the Palestinian struggle, telling the story of the journey that led them to see through what they were taught. Each of these people has their own unique path that I believe anyone can learn from. I hope you learn as much as I learn from them about how to build a better future for all people between the river and the sea. Yaniv is a member of Kibbutz Samar in the Arava, father of two, an independent journalist and activist on environmental and political issues, author of two books, both on environmental struggles he led, and a musician. Hi, Yaniv.
Hi, Av.
I'm very, very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
And you have so many good stories to tell, but maybe we'll start with your family's story. I think it tells a lot about who you've become.
So both my parents were born in Poland. My father in the mid-20s and my mother a decade later. And there's a big difference in the biography of my parents because my father was brought here when he was a little baby, 1926 or so. And he grew up in Tel Aviv. While my mother, who was born in 1935, her family stayed the war in Poland. And she had to go through the ghetto period in Warsaw. And they fled the ghetto and were caught and brought back and then fled again. So they had to survive the war in Poland, which was a very difficult situation, obviously. And her father did not survive. And she was running with her mother. And they were saved, their life was saved thanks to a Polish farmer who really took a big risk for having them and hiding Jews during the war. They could be killed for that. And after the war, my mother was taken by the Jewish agency and her mother had to stay in Poland. So my mother was moved to Israel in a ship. And she was incarcerated in Cyprus for half a year after the war, 11-year-old or 12-year-old girl, and she was alone. And I can explain why the Jewish agency decided to separate her from her mother, which is like a terrible thing after you lost your father. To be separated from your mother is like a crazy idea. And she didn't see her for a decade afterwards. So very tough life. So in that sense, my family could be like a showcase why a Jewish state where Jews allegedly can live safely is very needed.
And your mother basically survived the Holocaust, came here, and had a very challenging life. Even after she was brought here, she lived on a kibbutz as a child. What happened afterwards?
Her teens were quite reasonable, I think, after all that suffering that she was going through in Europe. And she rebuilt herself. And then she married my father. My father died some 14 years ago. And my mother is still alive. And she's 91 years old. And we talk daily. And they had two first boys, and then I came. So during her life, my mother had periods which were very difficult for her, and she was not home all the time. But I was born and raised in a kibbutz, so you could live and be supported by the whole community. And my father was very dominant in the first early years of my life because of that.
And you were born 1964.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about the kibbutz life, about growing up there. Where is it? What was it like?
Yeah, so my kibbutz is close to Hadera, which is like a town right in the middle between Tel Aviv and Haifa. And we're very close to the shore. And the kibbutz was founded in the early 1920s. So it's more than 100 years now. Now it sits on the lands of both areas that were bought from farmers of Hadera, who were Jews, but also on 3 Palestinian villages that were destroyed during the Nakba. And it had like a serious impact on my life. But I want to say before that we thought that we live in a perfect society on earth. We liked it very much. We didn't live with our parents. We were in kids' home.
What does that mean?
Explain. It means that you live, like your parents have, they don't even call it home, they call it a room, a cheder. So it's a very big, different notion of what life is. It's like you're with your friends, you live in a children's house, and you meet your parents for 3 or 4 hours a day, and you sleep away from them. And it was very usual to us, but, in hindsight, I think that it sounds like a very unhealthy condition when you don't have your parents next to you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, by the way, as a parent myself, that it is okay for the parents to, because it takes a very emotional toll on father and mother that cannot be next to their kids.
Mm-hmm. Your father, as you said, was very dominant in raising you, even though you weren't like sleeping in his home. You were sleeping away. You saw him only for a few hours a day. He was also a warrior in the Palmach. He also participated in the 1948 massacre in Tantura, in the village Tantura.
I don't think that he would agree that there was a massacre there. When my brother asked him, well, there are rumors that there was a massacre there, and he said, he slammed his hand to the table and told him, well, there was a war. And I understand it as he's asking us, don't implement your concept of reality on something that you cannot even perceive, which is it was a very different time, and everything was very cruel and very survival mode. But he was fighting, and there were people killed and attacks, and definitely, in my eyes, there was ethnic cleansing in the coastal plain. They just wanted them out. They were not posing any threat, but they didn't want any villages left on the coastal plain, and almost nothing left there.
So you were living on the kibbutz during the 60s, 70s. What was it like there? You said it was on the lands of 3 different Palestinian villages, in addition to lands that were bought. What was that like? Were you aware of the presence of the depopulated villages? Were there other villages still in the area?
Yes, it was a very confusing time. It was not long after the war, actually. There was a prominent village called Khorbat Sharkas in Arabic. We call it Cherkas. The kibbutz had a very good relationship with it. It's very close to the kibbutz.
Before 1948.
Before 1948. And the relationship were very warm. Kibbutz kids and village kids were playing soccer together. But when the war broke and this village did not accept the Arab armed forces to enter it, because they said, we want to stay here, we don't want to be part of the war. Nevertheless, the kibbutz and also the brigades of Jews deported them. There are pictures in the kibbutz archive of the deportation, and the kibbutz and the army took all the village homes down. And while we were kids, we were roaming in that plantation. It was like an orange plantation, and we could still find in the soil coins and ink, what do you call it? Ink pad? What do you call it? and relics of the life being lived there. And it was something, we knew that there was something wrong about it, but it was also, mixed with the feeling of finding important stuff in the ground. We didn't think of those people too much.
It was kind of like a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
For children.
Very thrilling. But we were aware in a way that there is something, which is complex about it.
Like that it's connected to a war that happened.
And to people that lived there. Mm-hmm. Who lived there? What happened to them? Where are they now?
Did you ask these questions?
I'm sure we did. And they said, there was a war and they fled. Okay, there was like a local myth that they fled on their own device because they saw that we started to use aluminum pipes as for irrigation, for watering, and they thought that it was cannons, which is a very ugly story. That's what we were told, because in a way it sits on the myth that Arabs are stupid, okay, because they see a tube and they think it's a weapon. And besides, if you are good neighbors, then you would tell them, hey, it's okay, it's just for agriculture. But it was like a myth to remote ourselves from any responsibility for that. And besides, even if my friend would flee his house, I would not take it down just because he's not there. So it means that there was intention of wiping any Palestinian presence from the coastal plain. But where the mountains started to climb, obviously there were close to us, many Palestinian villages, which brought me to be aware of the fact that, this is the challenge of our lives, to learn how to live together.
Already as a child?
Already as a child.
Because why? What were you being told about these Palestinians that were still there?
For one thing, the kibbutz was filled with Palestinian workers. They would build our homes and buildings, and they would work in maintenance and stuff like that. Carpenters, metal workers. The adults around us had to reconcile the fact that while Arabs are the enemy, they still build our homes and they walk among us. And the early 70s were terrible period in the sense that Palestinians, armed organization resistance, they attacked especially kibbutzim, but not only kibbutzim, also moshavim and towns in the Upper Galilee, and kids were kidnapped and then killed. So I was my awareness was shaped by this conflict of having Palestinians, which we didn't call Palestinians, we call them Arabs, both as the people that built our homes and on the same time the most cruel humans on earth that kidnap kids and kill them.
And while playing around in the ruins of the depopulated villages around you, you found something else. Or not you, but there was something else found.
When I was a teenager, we had this laboratory room in which they held stuffed animals, especially birds, and also serpents inside formaldehyde jars. And there was also a skeleton of a woman. And she was openly called by the name Fatma, which is like, for us, it was like a generic name for mocking name for an Arab woman. Obviously, it made us a little bit embarrassed because you're looking at a person. That's a person right there. That's Fatma. She also has a name. Only later on did I understand that there is something fundamentally wrong about the fact that you hold an Arab woman's bones just for you to learn about anatomy. And we were aware to it to some extent because whenever the teacher would say, I'll just bring Fatma so we can learn about whatever, he was like giggling, and I learned that she was dug from the lands of the village, neighboring village, Cherkas. And in recent years, I've tried to track down to see, how did she get there to become part of the natural exhibition, quote unquote, and what happened to it. Because back at the time, it was a racist period. We had jokes about Arabs. It was very common to speak about Arabs as if they are stupid, cowards, cruel, many negative qualities. So on that background, it was not very unusual to have a woman skeleton among other animals that you had in that exhibition room. But later on, I thought that maybe I should track it. So to tell the story of Fatma, who she was, what happened to her skeleton.
Maybe even she had a different name.
Yeah, and what were the circumstances it was dug out. It's a puzzle. And I do hope, by the way, that one day, I'm debating sometimes if to bring it up, like in a Facebook discussion saying, hey, help me to find Fatma. Because she deserves at least our request for forgiveness and acknowledging the fact that it was very wrong to use a human skeleton for your purposes. But I'm also want to indicate that it's very difficult to judge human behavior out of context. And the context was enormous bloodshed, animosity, fear, survival. So among all the things, terrible things like ethnic cleansing, apartheid, so the kibbutz was not very sensitive to human life when it came to Palestinians neighboring.
So you were kind of growing up with all of these contradicting things around you in regards to Palestinians, right? The ones that are no longer there and the ones that are still there.
Yes.
And in your high school years, you started really developing a more political stance.
Yeah, it was very much encouraged in the kibbutz. We had a very advanced political education in many ways, like history, simulations, lectures, and so on. We met Palestinians and we learned spoken Arabic, which is very different from what's going on in current times in Israel. So I decided that Arabic is something important for me. Maybe it was because my father had his closest friend was an Arab from Bak el-Gharbiya. We still keep contact with him. We meet him every once in a while. And I had this attraction to Palestinian question. And I was politically aware quite early on. And when I was 14 years old, all of us were part of Shomer Hatzair, which is like a left Zionist youth movement. And my instructor there, she came to me, she was 18, something like that, and she told me privately, okay, could not be any other way than privately, and say to me, I'm going to al-Fahem, which is like a neighboring Arabic village, now it's a big town. I'm going there to meet youngsters, Palestinian prisoners that were just released from Israeli prison. Would you like to come with me? And it was like, I knew at that moment that it is a pivoting moment in my life. And I had no question. I said to her, yes, I want. Even though I knew it's going to be very intimidating in a way because we didn't have close contact. And this was obviously crossing a line. Because these Palestinian prisoners were obviously convicted of doing something which is criminal. And they were, I learned only in recent years, a part of an Israeli-Palestinian network of activists that really tried to imagine and work for a new reality in which there will be equality and justice for all. unlike a Zionist paradigm, which is based on Jewish superiority.
Were they incarcerated for doing that, or were they incarcerated for doing something criminal? I'm confused.
I think it was illegal for them. It was called a forbidden organization. And she told me straight on, they belong to a political group called Abna al-Balad, which means the youngsters of the village.
Yeah, or the children of the village, like the sons of the village.
The sons of the village still is a political movement based in al-Fahim.
It's outlawed.
It was outlawed there. Now I think they are legitimate. They are not being chased by the regime. But back at the time, they were banned from running to the parliament, to the Knesset.
Mm-hmm.
So it was evident that we're crossing some line there. But I was very curious and I trusted her. And she understand, looking at me, that, if to address somebody from my class, my group, so it would be me.
How was this meeting with them?
I remember, first of all, everybody was smoking. I smoked with them. I was 14. They were very open to us. They really appreciated the fact that we came. And they told us their story. I remember especially one person. His name is Ghassan Ighbarieh. And Ghassan lives in New York. I see him as a political exile. And I renewed the contact with him after more than 40 years. And we keep contact ever since. And he told me about the ways that he was tortured in Israeli prison. This is something I don't want to detail because it's very graphic. And I didn't have any doubt that he was speaking the truth. So it really shattered me in a way and made me radical for a while. But, life is complicated. And after a while, I was exposed to lots of Zionist discourse. So I did not become a non-Zionist. I had to be a part of my group.
And in your kibbutz, there was actually someone who did become more radicalized. One of the children of the kibbutz.
He was part of that network. It was called the Israeli-Palestinian Network. And they were convicted for espionage. And he himself did really do stuff that is strictly unacceptable for Zionists, because he went to Syria and he did some training, armed training with the Palestinian groups over there. And Ghassan was also part of that group. And actually, my kibbutz suffered a lot because of this youngster who really crossed the line.
He was about your age or a little older?
No, he's 18 years older than I am.
So when this happened,
I was 10 years old or so.
So what did you see as a child when this kind of came out?
I remember my father talking very negatively about him. Nobody ever said, well, there was a point in trying to organize a shared, equal, common life. No, it looked as if it was framed as if they were just trying to erect some terrorist group.
As treason.
As treason, totally. So my kibbutz was named the kibbutz of the traitors.
Oh, because of him.
Because of him. And buses would not stop for a long while in the kibbutz because we were banned from... So that influenced in a way because all the time there was this label on us that we are not loyal to the state. So we tried to show that we are.
You, as in the rest of the kids.
Everybody. The whole kibbutz was trying to say, hey, he does not represent us. He's like a weed, the outskirts of the field. But in a way, today I look at him because I read his biography, and then it is very clear that he just took it one step further. But this awareness of the conflict, of the evil that we've done to the Palestinians, the great price that they had to pay, the local indigenous population paid for our independence, it was very much present in the open discourse. But ever since he was discovered and imprisoned, it was like a warning sign for all of us. The name of this young guy is Udi Adiv, and he's like the ultimate symbol of Israeli left-wing traitor who crosses the lines and willing to not only adapt the Palestinian narrative, but also take armed actions against the state of Israel and against the society in which we were living.
So you as a child look at this person and you say, I can't go that far.
Yeah, just make sure you don't cross that line. And I did cross it in the sense that, only when I read his biography and crossing that notion with the fact that I was invited to take part in some kind of alliance with just listening to prisoners is like I was the next recruit, actually. And it didn't cross beyond that line, but I was willing and still willing to do a lot to change the situation so there will be justice also for Palestinians. Because early on I recognized that there will be no solution to this conflict unless we bring justice to the people that paid enormous prices for our freedom.
So you were developing this political awareness during your youth. And earlier today you told me, I was aware of the Palestinian issue, or I was aware of the occupation, but I was still racist. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so this is something quite embarrassing, but I think that one should show example that you are willing to acknowledge everything that you've done. I want to take full responsibility for every action that I ever took in my life. So while being more and more active politically in Shalom Achshav, in Peace Now, youth movement, and organizing stuff and taking part in demonstrations, also meeting Palestinian prisoners. So on the same time, I've been very cruel and very somewhat violent against youngsters my age that lived with me who were not kibbutz kids. And I was very racist to them, especially for those of Mizrahi origin, because they represent the other, and I could call them, you are like the Arabs on the same time, because I had this split in my mind that I'm pro-Palestinian in a way, but at the same time, Palestinian represents something which is like inferior. And this is something very ugly and very painful for them, obviously, because I was bullying them in my 8th and 10th grade. And this is something that I cannot redeem, actually. I asked for their forgiveness.
Oh, you really? You contacted them?
Yeah, I've contacted them. A few of them, it's like 4 or 5 guys, maybe less even. But this is something that I will carry with myself all my life. I can have like my excuses because there was lack of adult presence. We were just like independent youth with no borders in all senses. And the society was racist. And I was susceptible to that. Maybe some other time we'll talk about everything that comes with it. But I want to acknowledge the fact that racism was so embedded in the discourse and inside myself that I could not see that it is evil on my side, on one hand to meet Palestinians and to identify with their suffering, and on the same time inflicting suffering on young adolescents, like teens, my age, who were just misfortunate. So they were taken away from their families and had to live with us. And we didn't accept them. I did not.
There's a concept that's called Yaldei Chutz in Hebrew, like kids from outside, basically mostly Mizrachim, not only, but
not only, yeah.
Many of these children were Mizrachim Jews from Arab countries, Muslim countries, who would kind of grow up in like a boarding school environment within a kibbutz.
We lived together, we slept together.
But your family was living on the kibbutz and their family was not. That's why they're called outside kids. They're
external kids.
External kids, yeah. Even the name already kind of invites the bullying, right? Like,
yeah. They are marked as they don't belong.
So after high school, developing politically, you still decided to enlist in the military?
I think it was something that had to do with the whole political movement, social movement, those kibbutzim.
Socialist?
The socialist kibbutzim, especially Shomer Hatzeh, which is like the left Zionism. It was during the First Lebanon War, and there was a big discussion about refusal.
This is in the early 80s.
Yeah. I decided to enlist, even though for me it was like the end of my life, in a way. Because I was a hippie boy. I liked my life very much, with music and girls and stuff. But it was very evident that everything was going to be ended once I'm recruited. And it was pretty much so. It was a very tragic phase for me. There was no other option. Okay, you had to be either very sick or very crazy. Everyone would enlist. And if you didn't want to be part of that, even if you didn't want to be a combat soldier, you had to put your foot under a truck. You couldn't say, I don't want that. It was not an option. Everybody, like, it was almost 100% recruitment.
Did you think at the time, what will Ghassan think of my recruiting?
No, did not occur to me.
Did you talk to him about this?
No, I didn't keep contact with him. I didn't have any Arab friends.
At the time when you were like...
I met him only once and didn't keep contact. I didn't have any Arab friends during my teens.
Mm-hmm.
Also because I moved to the Arava area, which is very remote from Arab population and from political awareness as well.
So you moved as a teenager already?
Yeah.
As part of this whole track of
I
enlisting
think
in the military and establishing a kibbutz.
I want to make a point, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So because of the way I didn't like myself, because of the way I was in my kibbutz, I didn't like myself, okay? Because of that contradiction between me being a very good person and doing terrible stuff at the same time. I didn't like myself. So I wanted to restart my life. So I was forming a group with a few friends, and we moved to the Arava Valley, which is deep south of Israel, not far from Eilat, the Red Sea. And that really put an end for my direct political involvement, because everything is so far from here. And I was busy with my study, and then later on with the kibbutz life, and so on. And I was recruited from Samar, okay? And
what do you mean you recruited from Samar?
I enlisted to the army as a member of Nahal unit. That means that we could keep contact with the new kibbutz of ours, which we were about to reinforce, to become members of. And I started my military service in that frame. And I was very depressed because I realized it's going to be disastrous. And sure enough, my nightmares came to pass while during the first week of basic training, 2 soldiers committed suicide, one after the other. And I saw it coming. I felt the same. I felt that I myself could commit suicide, because it was like a pinnacle of violence and meaningless service for wrong war in Lebanon. So I just waited for the shot to be heard. And when it did, we were shocked, obviously. And it was like the whole base was like, wow. And they talked to us and told us that those guys had problems from home and they just found the opportunity, which was an ugly lie. By the way, there's a very interesting article about the second person that commits suicide the day after the first one. And his life could be spared. And very serious allegations that our commanders ignored, his friends pleading for helping him out because he showed many signs of distress. I myself had like a emergency scorpion that I found in the field, and I kept it in a small box. So if push comes to shove, I can sting myself and get out for at least 48 hours to a hospital. And my friend, he was with me on this very small tent, and he said to me, "Don't do it because he will sting me instead of you." And I had it like as a symbol for showing embodying my predicament during those days. It was like hell. I can portray our basic training as the transformation procedure of taking a Jew and turning a Jewish refugee into somebody who can implement violence against others.
So eventually you decided not to commit suicide and go
No,
on
I was not close to suicide, but I was close to harming myself, like people would do if they want to get some extent of control over their lives inside the army.
You continued with the service, but not as a combat soldier.
No, I could not.
So what were you doing?
After half a year of service on the border with Egypt and Gaza Strip, I was transferred to become a military correspondent or writer in the core monthly newspaper, because I had like this skill of being a writer in a way. And there, everything became to be easier on me because I could live in Tel Aviv a bit and roam around the country. I was not in Lebanon while my friends were there. And I've serviced the occupation in that way of normalizing the reality of the military being on the same time the defense force of the country, but on the same time also part of the occupation machine and confiscation of lands and outposts in the West Bank and so on, and brutalizing, controlling Palestinians in Gaza Strip and in the West Bank.
Through the media.
The media, our part was to give like a positive perspective, also a realistic one of what it means to be a soldier at that time. So we would describe our lives in all those places where Nahal soldiers were serving in Lebanon, in Golan Heights, in the West Bank, and also in Gaza.
It's also kind of a way to create sympathy for the soldiers, to tell their stories from their eyes.
Yeah, that was my job.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, at one point, I was the editor of that monthly newspaper, which was usually done by a professional civil person. So I was promoted in a way, and they were very much afraid of me, rightly so. But eventually they realized that for the benefit that I got from that, I will not break the silence. I would not use it to out the brutality and cruelty of what it means to be an occupation army.
But why were they afraid that you would do that? Were you showing signs?
Because of my background, because I'm from that kibbutz of the traitors, and because I was a very opinionated person. But I knew, I call it like, there's like useful idiots. So I call us, the media soldiers, I call us useful smart asses.
Because you were helping the military normalize itself.
Yeah, but do it in a fashion that will give the impression that it is still like an open society.
Because you did have a little bit of criticism with him.
Yeah, we could deal with like political stuff that you would not imagine that the army would allow. Talking about the occupation and like, for instance, at one time I was asked to make an article interviewing Knesset members and academics. It was called 1919 because it was like saying 19 years from 48 to 67, 67 war, and then Israel getting the grasp over the occupied territories, and 19 years since 67, which means that Israel is saying it is not temporary thing. It becomes like the tipping point in which Israel with the West Bank and Gaza Strip is older than Israel without it.
Oh, okay. More years went by with the occupation than the ones before.
Yeah.
The occupation of the territories.
I think it's interesting that they allowed to enable this perspective.
So you finished your military service and you became a journalist in your civilian life. And there was actually something that you covered that was a very extreme incident right after your military service.
I was released when the first Intifada broke out. Luckily, I was not part of the military during that time. But as a journalist, I was covering some of the Intifada events, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. But the most outstanding incident that I was covering was two Palestinians, Gazans workers, were locked up in a metal shack. Somebody spilled gasoline underneath the door and set the whole place in fire. And they died. They were burned to death. And I was sent by the paper to report about that incident. So I came to that place. It was in Or Yehuda. It's a small town not far from Tel Aviv. And the shack was like 50 meters from the houses of the town itself. There was a small patch of land, a small field.
And they were sleeping there in the night.
They were sleeping there because Israel was heavily employing workers from both West Bank and Gaza. And they were working in construction, in agriculture, in caregiving, everywhere. So somebody decided to kill them. By the way, he was never caught. So I came there and there was not much to do. I looked at the place. It was obviously charred. The bodies were not there anymore. So I went to the neighboring house and I knocked on a door. Nobody answered, so I climbed to the second floor and somebody opened to me. And I told him, I introduced myself, asked him, was he eyewitnessing the incident? So he told me, yes, you can see the shack from the balcony here. It's here. It's very close. I said, did you hear them? He said, well, they screamed to high heavens. So I told him...
as they were being burnt alive.
Yeah, as they were being burnt alive. So I told him, what did you do? And he said, I did nothing. I said, why didn't you do anything? He said, because I'm mourning. A member of my family died. I told him, what does it have to do with helping people? He said, if I was not in mourning, I would dance on the balcony. And what the Germans have done to us, we will do to the Palestinians. So in a way, there is this transference of the hate and fear that we felt toward Germans to the Palestinians.
And you quoted him in this article.
Yeah.
So for about, you could say 2 decades afterwards, after this incident of being a journalist, shortly after finishing the military, you were an activist against the occupation, but kind of like
low-key activist.
Low-key, yeah. During the 90s, during the early 2000s, the second Intifada, and afterwards, you were living in very remote areas.
Yeah.
And you weren't like...
Involved. Basically, directly. No, I was not.
But you still tried to kind of like awaken people around you to the occupation.
Yeah. I was learning Arabic. I was talking about it. I did some artistic gestures and trying to make sense and trying to warn people, saying, "Hey, this has to be solved."
So you had kind of a few decades of
hibernation. I don't know how to call it exactly, but I was busy living my life, raising kids, building community. Life happens.
And then what happened?
So when the kids grew up, I was trying to teach them that there is a problem and that they should be aware that most people do not think that there is a problem, but I think there is a problem. So whenever we would travel by car next to, like if we would cross through the Jordan Valley, I would tell them, this is an occupied area. We are passing here because we need to do it, but it's not our land. And you see people around here that they are occupied. They are suffering from Israeli brutality. But life was very different from any activism. Later on, I started to get much more into Arabic studying and started to teach myself, to teach other people, to become a teacher here in the kibbutz. It's very important for me that there will be some presence of the Arabic language here on the board of the dining room and people talking and meeting weekly. So I've done it for many years. And the big change came about when I was almost a decade ago, when the kids were old enough so I could, they didn't live here anymore, so I could go on my own journey outside of the kibbutz, which is not very common for kibbutz members to leave their kibbutz.
You were also divorced by now as well.
Yeah, I was on my own. I took half a year off the kibbutz and went on my journey. And part of my journey was a young woman. We were partners, we were a couple, and we were going through a very intense process of becoming more and more involved in activism, both environmental and political. And in 2017, during that year, I took part in a conference in Givat Chaviva, which is a place shared by Jews and Arabs, Palestinian and Israelis. And there, for the first time, I heard the term ethnic cleansing regarding to 48 war. And when I looked at it inside myself, I said, yes, that would be a precise description of what I know that happened very close to where that's the place where I was born, really. It's Wadi Ara, it's close to Hadera, and knowing about the stories about Cherkas and the village of Tantura, where my late father took part in that attack on the village, I said, yes, they had like intention. It was not just a war. There was a move, there was a serious move, deliberate to clean, so to speak, quote unquote, Arab presence from as much area as the Jews could do. And it really, in a way, put my Zionism into question. Because if you are aware of the fact that your people, your group, perpetrated crimes against humanity, then one must question the morality of our own existence, of the way that we run this place.
So when you say our own existence and the way that we run this place, but those two are not exactly the same thing. When you say our own existence, you mean our own existence in this manner. Not the fact that we exist,
exactly.
But the ways in which we have chosen to manage this existence.
I have met hundreds of Palestinians and interviewed many of them during my career as a journalist. And always it is, they accept you. I was not afraid to get inside very serious places in the West Bank and in other places. And obviously inside the sovereign part of Israel, everybody says it's okay to live together, but you should let us go back to our homes or give us some justice or independence. So I was not afraid of them, never was afraid of Arabs, actually. But I realized that there was something fundamentally wrong in the way that reality was communicated to us, Israeli youngsters. And then also during those endless discussions and arguments and debates with my partner, I realized, first of all, that refusal to take part in the army is like a fundamental civil human right, which is something that did not occur to me when I was a youngster, like those guys that committed suicide. You would rather kill yourself, shoot yourself in the head, than just stepping out of the mainstream of we couldn't imagine that. And I was part of trying to normalize the option of not serving. And I was very much influenced by that woman. She told me, no, we should, because we had a project, we called it was exactly the 50th year anniversary of the occupation.
From 67.
67, yes, not 48. At that time, I saw like the green line was very clear to me. Not anymore. So we made a project. It was like a couple thing of campaigning, saying 50 ways to end the occupation. So we made a list. It was quite a challenge to find 50 different ways, saying anything from like in Facebook for a post that opposed the occupation until becoming part of a group, donating money,
learning Arabic,
many options. Just pick your way and get fucking involved.
You initiated this? I think I've seen this online.
Yeah, with this.
You and her?
Yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
And we every item on that list was like a debate
between
emotion.
You guys?
Yeah, and I gave up because she was smarter still is than I am. And we've made spread thousands of copies of that list and posters, and made like a Facebook page with it. Didn't go anywhere more than that. But in a way, when people are saying, what happened to us? This is so unfair. This is so terrible. What's going on? Okay, I want to rephrase. We said there a list of 50 things that we can do, each and every one of us Jews can do, Israeli Jews.
Like simple things.
Simple things in your life. Even dinner, Saturday night dinner tables can be a political arena. Everything is political. And you should do something about it in order to release the Palestinians from our grip and release ourselves from the position of occupiers. Because we are not free as long as we enslave others.
Mm-hmm. So
I'm very proud that we've done this. Obviously, the impact was zero. But when people say, we cannot live with them together, this is so terrible what they do to us, I say, yeah, but we were just waving our hands and saying, we need to solve it. You said, no, everything is cool. I call it the Palestinian paradox. In relatively quiet times, we don't have anything, there's no need to do anything because everything is okay. They just want to eat their pita bread and live their lives.
Everything's okay for us.
Change is not needed. You say, okay, everything is okay. What are you talking about? Say, Palestinian, look, they just want to live. And when they revolt and when they rise, you say, with those guys, we cannot do anything because they are violent and they are brutal and they are cruel and they're primitive and so on. I call it the Palestinian paradox. They cannot catch. I call it the Palestinian catch because if they sit, they will be enslaved. And if they rise and they stand, then we say, well, first of all, sit down.
So this relationship was very much affecting you. This partner of yours at the time, she was very involved and you became very involved with her, and she kind of like moved you to the
non-Zionist, totally. Mm-hmm. She de-Zionized me.
She de-Zionized you?
She de-Zionized me.
And today, you and your son play in a band together, which is like the sweetest thing ever. I've seen a few concerts, but you also go to Protective Presence together as a father and son, which is also very sweet, but also very important.
Yeah, so he paved the way for me in that sense, mm-hmm. because I did not take part in an activity like this before. And he started to going to the Jordan Valley to protect Bedouin communities over there, a bit north of Jericho. And after a while, I was worried because I know what's going on there. I know the endless attacks on local communities and displacement and terror, basically. And he started to go there. And I was very proud, I still am, but I was worried. So I told him, is it okay for me to come with you once?
Just because you wanted to see what he was involved in and you were worried about him about his safety.
Yeah. I said, is it okay for me to come and see what's going on there? He said, yes, no problem, join me. So we took the train to Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, we took a car so we can drive to that remote place. And while we were nearing the car, I noticed that there were like bullet holes in the car's doors. And I told him, what is this? And he said, some of our partners, activists, they were attacked from the ambush or something like that. And I was shocked, but he was very cool with that. And I said to myself, I'm not a parent anymore. I'm just, I accompany the guy who leads it. He's my son, but it's his responsibility. He's been there a few times. And he was very calm and serious about it. And we just drove. And it was a very challenging experience. And I've been there a few times because the situation there is really terrible. So we slept in a small Arab village, which is constantly, day and night, being threatened by the settlers. Some of them teenagers that really penetrate they enter the village and they terrorize, they frighten the people, and they don't let them access to the water. And the whole situation is very tense. And the settlers are usually armed. Everything is volatile and sometimes screamings and threatens. And you cannot call the police or the army because they sometimes do appear there, but it is evident that they will try to bully the locals whom we are trying to protect. So in a way, over there, you experience like a flip in which you feel safe and okay and calm while you're in the Palestinian part. And whenever a settler or the military come, so you are very much afraid of them.
So you mean a flip in terms of feeling unsafe with your own, so-called your own people, and feeling safer with the other side?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can very much relate to this sentiment.
And also feeling deep shame for what my people, so-called, because I have like a very deep urge to detach myself from a society that behaves in that way. It's like the ugliest way, almost,
I want to ask you about something that you realized about Zionism later on in your life. Maybe after your relationship with this woman that had a lot of influence on you. Because you told me earlier about, this deep understanding about Zionism, that we were taught things differently than they were in reality. And there was this one thing that stood out for you.
Yes, I think that in the last 5 years, I realized that maybe the most important lie that we were told is that we fought the British to gain our independence. And it was the other way around, actually. This is a complex story because eventually some of the Jewish armed groups did terrorize the British, and I believe it had some influence on the decision to end their period here, the mandate. By the way, Ben-Gurion, he begged the British to stay some more years until the Jewish population here will be stronger, so they can fight against the Arab forces, which came from all around also. Not also like this civil war between those two nations entangled one into the other. I must indicate something that most people don't do, which is the greatest terrorist attack that ever happened until October 7th was perpetrated by Jews in the King David Hotel attack. I think it was in 1947 or something like that. Maybe I'm 1 year wrong. Almost 100 people got killed in a single attack, most deadliest. And it was done by Jews. But generally speaking, British came here. The mandate is about enabling Jews to form a Jewish state in Palestine. Jews entered Palestine with the guns of the British. The mandate is not just a general idea. It has like a specific goal, which is to build a Jewish state in Palestine. That's what the mandate is about.
So why were we told that the British were actually against a Jewish state and we had to fight them out to gain our independence? Why is this?
Yeah, for a good reason, okay? Because there was a struggle between the British and the Jews. Because the British, while promising the European Jews that they will enable us to colonize Palestine, they had to state a complementary declaration saying that the legal rights of non-Jewish population, that's how it's being defined in the Balfour Declaration. Non-Jewish population will not be compromised, those legal rights. So Balfour Declaration is a disaster for the indigenous population here. But at the same time, it forced the British to put some limit to the pace in which Jews colonized Palestine. Okay? So the British, at some point when the Arabs started to revolt against the process in which the land and life are being ruled by the Jewish interest, when they start to fight back, the British fought them fiercely, and they killed 5,000 Palestinians and really shattered the whole Palestinian political structure during the Arab revolt between the years 1936 and 1939. And at the same time, to try a bit to subside the Palestinian resistance, they started to put limitations on Jewish immigration. So to make a long story short, we were brought, especially also in the Shomer HaTzair, all Zionist groups are taught that we fought the British for our freedom, for our independence. But as a matter of fact, we came here on their guns in accordance with the Balfour Declaration. And the evidence for that can be found in the streets of, in the names of the streets of Tel Aviv, the first Hebrew city, as it's called. Because if we fought the British, how come we gave their leaders and their generals and their kings the main streets of Tel Aviv? Balfour Street is connected to Allenby Street. Allenby Street connected to King George Street. King George Street is parallel to Herbert Samuel, which was the first commissioner for the British in Palestine. And guess what? He was a Jew. So just to try to pretend that we were really fighting them, no, they were fighting for us. And they were crushing the Palestinians. Yes, they had to give some impression that they tried to be unbiased. But it was very clear why they came here. They came here to keep their interests, and one of their interests was to have a beachhead of European Jewish colonization of Palestine and to solve their own problems over there in Europe on the expense of the local indigenous population, which was also Jewish in some part of it. There was no problem between Jews and Palestinians, Muslims, Christians, many sects that live here. Zionism is the problem. And I must say that for me, the realization of the motivation and the Palestinian narrative was a very liberating experience, because it makes sense. If you think that Arabs are monsters that want to kill your children, so how come they build your kibbutz? And if you don't tell their story properly, then you don't tell yours as well. And you can't understand why do they attack us, and why do they live peacefully with us in the Galilee or in Jaffa, in Haifa.
Well, I think the Zionist regime has its way of explaining this by saying they live in peace with us in areas where we've been able to suppress their uprising properly, effectively. I think many Zionist Israelis would claim, for example, that the reason that the Palestinians from 48, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, didn't uprise in the time period between October 7th and today is because we suppressed them very, very strongly. We incarcerated them for posts on Facebook, sympathizing with children in Gaza, for example. Some Israelis would say, very good, that was very effective. That's why we can live in peace with them, because we showed them who's boss.
Well, that's one way of putting things. And I guess, if you let people total freedom, maybe they will express themselves. The question is, which kind of country do you want to live in? If you want to live in a place where you all the time have to exert power and violence to keep people afraid, to me it's not interesting. I don't think that's a sustainable society. It's not it's not peace. I think people need a reliable description of reality. And if you constantly feeding yourself with propaganda about the other side, that it means that you have a distorted perception of reality, and you cannot even understand and expect what's going on. That's like the greatest collapse of Israeli very well sponsored and very invested security concept, is because they didn't see them as people. They see them as subjects, not as humans. Okay, they are not citizens. They don't have passports. They are just like, nobody gives a fuck about them. So if there was like at least one radical left guy in the Ministry of Defense or in the army, he would come and say, listen, we cannot going on and do it endlessly. Like Obama said, it's unsustainable. What's going on in Gaza is unsustainable. But they said, no, we can carry on with that. I was not surprised in October 7th. I just said, oh, so that's how it will unfold. Because I said to myself, we cannot sit on our butts and just count the intifadas, saying, first intifada, second intifada, maybe this is like the intifada of knives, this is the intifada of people who operate alone. This is not this is an unrest. No, it's not make your wish life. It's other people's life. So expect the unexpected.
Do you talk to your mother about these things?
Sometimes, not really. My mother has such serious emotional stuff to cope with, so I'm trying to avoid that. From time to time, I tell her, that's what I think. I think what we're doing is terrible. And in a way, it's worse than the Holocaust. You know why? Because the Holocaust already happened, and we should learn something from it. We did not.
You say this to her?
I'm not sure if I said that like directly, but I'm telling her, you know, for the kids of Gaza, it doesn't mean anything if the Holocaust was even worse than that. It's a Holocaust for them.
What does she say?
First of all, as I said, we don't discuss it deeply, but she says, yes, it's terrible what's going on. And I'm not trying to make things harder for her. So I really, I pity her. Mm-hmm. Okay? I just let her, you know, live her life. I don't say, Mommy, you have to talk about... I don't try to weaponize her trauma to make a point. Mm-hmm. If we need that, it's not nice.
And your father, your brother, tried to confront him with the massacre of Tantura that he was part of. Did you ever speak to him about it?
Not really. I have left home when I was in my teens, and I didn't spend much time with my father. And I also tried to be easy on him on that, because he obviously was traumatized also by his part in the ethnic cleansing and in the war, and he witnessed terrible stuff. And in a strange, mysterious way, he tried to redeem, I think, his part in the war by being friends with Arabs. In the kibbutz, he didn't have any personal friend, but in the neighboring village, he had a few good friends, and he would go hunting with them, and he would hang out with them, and he would be happy and free with his Palestinian friends.
That's very ironic. Do you think they knew about his involvement?
Yeah.
So when did you contact Ghassan again, the young Palestinian prisoner at the time, released prisoner? And why?
3 years ago, I took another period outside of the kibbutz, and I went to live in an Arab village in the Upper Galilee. And I had some time for myself there, and also created a mixed group of Palestinians and Jews. And I had this idea that maybe I want to try to locate this guy. So in this group that we formed, we have a good friend from Al-Fahim, where I met Ghassan Irbarieh back in the 70s. I'm that old. Mm-hmm. So I told her, can you help me find this guy? I hope he's alive. And also I figured, he should be a famous person because he was a leader. He was a leader. He was not just, nobody. He was one of the leaders of this political group, Abna al-Balad. So I told her his name is Ghassan Irbarieh. He's like same family name like yours. So she told me, well, there's no guy by that name, Ghassan Irbarieh. And I told her, I'm positive that was his name. And she told me, there is a guy named Ghassan Fauzi. Maybe he's the guy that you are looking for. I told her, but that's not the name, definitely. She told me, yes, but contact him. And I looked him up on Facebook, and apparently he lives in New York.
So what's up with the different family name?
So I wrote him on Facebook, on Messenger. Hey, I'm Yaniv Golan. Back in 1978 or 9, I met a group of youngsters from Al-Fahim. And maybe it was you, because I have a friend that says that maybe it was you. So he said, yes, it was me. I was very moved. And I told him, but I remember that your name was Irbarieh. So he said, yes, but that was like a name that the Jews gave to us, because we were like a small family inside the big family of...
Like a bigger clan.
Yeah. So later on, I readapted our original name. And we started to chat in English. And he was a bit suspicious at first, but very fast he realized that my heart is on the right place, which is the left side. And he was very curious about the fact that this meeting so many years ago influenced somebody, and he changed my life in a way because he opened the option of looking at the other side, liberating me from the position of, oppressor. I don't want to be an oppressor. And we had conversations, not many, but a few of them. And we write each other every once in a while. And he told me about his life. He came here rarely in the last decades. I read his post. He likes mine. So that's about it. I would love to interview him. And he was reluctant in a way. I don't know if it's because he's traumatized from the prisons or because he's afraid. Can be many things. I think he's important. For me, he's important. And I see him as a person in exile. And I wish for him to come back here if he wishes to spend his years. We are getting older. I wish that we will listen to him and to his partners, because they meant well. They meant well, definitely. They saw the problem back in the 70s while we cannot still see it today. And we will have no peace by any means until we recognize those people. I'm saying that we don't understand Arabic because we don't want to understand Arabs. And we don't know them because we don't want to recognize them. The situation serves well the idea of Jewish dominance.
Mm-hmm.
Fear, gap.
You have any closing remarks about your situation today?
First of all, I would say that after spending 12 years or more campaigning for the environment here, I want to spend my last years trying to bridge between Jewish and Palestinian societies. And I want to devote myself. I see myself as committed. That's the only thing that really matters to me.
What is?
Solving the conflict is the only thing that really interests me. I didn't buy a ticket abroad for more than 35 years.
You haven't been abroad?
I've been abroad with my mom to accompany her on senior tours in Europe. But I didn't go for my own things since 1990 almost.
Wow.
Because I had great life and I've done amazing stuff that I enjoyed very much. And I can die now with a smile on my face, with many friends around me. But I really want to devote my last years. I'm 61 now. I have maybe 20 good years, maybe a bit more. Most of my life is behind me. I'm closer to 80 than to 40, okay? And I have trained myself to be able to talk with both populations, both nations, and to get closer emotionally. In Hebrew, you say you buy a friend. You need to make an effort. So I made that effort, and today I cannot imagine my life without my Palestinian friends. And I want to help both nations to make the step towards a better future. And I'm really intending to move to a place where I can be useful for that effort, historic effort, of trying to make this place a bit better and less bloody, because the life that we live here are not worth living. What we have here is not something, and my son, like my older son, left Israel with his partner, and he'd rather live in Germany than here. And for my mom, as a Holocaust survivor, that was a very difficult thing, to accept the fact that her grandson is preferring Berlin over her kibbutz. And I told her, that's like the ultimate revenge against Hitler, My son lives a good life in Berlin and you're dead. So for me, the lesson from what happened in Europe, and especially in Germany, shows that if we can reconcile and make peace with the Germans and our common past as those horrors, then the Palestinians, well, that's totally workable and plausible. But this really gives you the glimpse of the possibility of reconciliation and rebuilding life for the benefit of all.
Thank you, Yaniv. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Yav, for the opportunity and for your great work. I'm a humble fan of yours,
And I'm your fan. And thank you very, very much for the Patreons that help this podcast keep going. I really appreciate your support, and anyone who wants to join is welcome. There's a link in the show notes. I will very, very much appreciate it. And thank you for listening.